Hey everyone, it's Susan here, and I'm here to talk about my field placement experience in YOED 3000. Okay, so my field placement experience with my mentor teacher, Mrs. Brown, went really well. So I did it at Coffee County High School in Manchester, Tennessee. So that's where I live, and that's why I chose to do it there because it was just close to home and it was easy to get there. It's actually where I graduated high school, and so it was just a very nostalgic experience to go back there and just, roam the halls like I did when I was a teenager. And Mrs. Brown was actually a former teacher of mine, so it was just a really great experience to be there with her and rekindle our relationship because we always had a great relationship, even whenever we were, student and teacher. She's actually one of the inspirations for me wanting to become a teacher. So it was just a really great experience with her. So while I was there at Coffee County High School, I learned a lot about the career field and the reality of being a teacher in this day and age. So the group of students I observed were 11th graders, and I absolutely loved it. I feel like this experience has really opened my eyes to what grade I would like to teach when I become a licensed professional because I really loved being around the 11th graders. I just found them to be super funny and just, super great kids. You know what I mean? So the interviewer segment of my field placement started on October 12th. My mentor teacher is an absolutely amazing educator, as I was saying earlier, who believes that building relationships are so important in the classroom. She has helped create such an incredible community in her classes where everybody feels welcomed. In order to keep her classes running smoothly, she does use a lot of routine-based strategies. So as soon as her students come in for class, there is bell work that is projected on the projector screen, ready for them to complete as soon as they sit down. She also lists all the supplies they're going to need for class, as well as the agenda for today's class. That way students are prepared before class even starts. So Mrs. Brown believes that routine goes a long way when it comes to classroom management. So she always establishes a routine on the first day of school, and she always sticks to it. So in regards to her strategies for keeping the class on task or dealing with misbehavior, she uses a couple of non-verbal preventatives, such as using close proximity or making eye contact with the student who's being disruptive. She also uses verbal preventatives if students are continuously being disruptive in her class. Examples of these include calling on the disruptive student to answer a question about the lesson, or just to say their name so that way they know that, she's watching them. As for consequences for misbehavior or rule breaking, Mrs. Brown told me that she follows the high school's code of conduct. But in her 10 years of teaching, she hasn't had to send very many students to the principal's office. Most of the time, she can de-escalate a problem before it gets out of hand. So, most of the time, students in her class do behave themselves. So as for the data that she has to keep up with in her classes, she does have to keep up with if students have like an IEP or a 504 plan to follow. Out of the classes I observed, there was one student who had ADHD. So Mrs. Brown does have to take that data into consideration whenever she is planning lessons for that class. So overall, her philosophy for classroom management is closely related to her beliefs about quality instruction. She gets through to her students by building those relationships with them throughout the year. And she does hold her students accountable and does have high expectations for them. But at the same time, she does understand that they do need grace. She understands that things happen, life happens, and sometimes they're going to miss class, and sometimes they're going to have to, turn in an assignment late. And she understands that because she's very compassionate and understanding. The thing that surprised me the most about the answer she gave me during the interview was that our morals and values are so close together. So I hope that one day that I can become, such an amazing educator like she is, because a lot of our values are the same. We believe a lot of the same things when it comes to classroom management and just relationships with students and things like that. So the observer segment of my field placement took place on the 26th and the 31st of October. I observed twice. And the group of students I observed were the 11th graders, and it was third, fourth, and fifth period. The topic for the day of the 26th was analyzing certain elements in a text. The text was Fahrenheit 451. And the 31st was a review day where we played a game that asked questions about the text to review for a upcoming test that they were going to have. So both days, classes did start on time with bell work at the beginning of class, followed by the review of bell work, and then the instruction began. So like I mentioned earlier, Mrs. Brown follows routine to help with order, but also time management is another great factor of using routines every single day. So the classes ended on time each day as well. So I honestly believe that she plans for the class to end earlier than the full 50 minutes in case the lessons take longer than expected, or, students have questions, things like that. So I felt like that was a really good strategy. And I'll probably use that when I start teaching one of these days. The students were engaged in the lesson on the 26th because the teacher would stop the audiobook that the students were following along with their own copy and ask questions regarding what just happened in the book, their opinions on relationships between characters in the book, and specific character traits of certain characters throughout the book in order to keep the class engaged and check for understanding. On the 31st, the class was definitely engaged in the review game they were playing. Students love taking a day to do a fun activity instead of doing, traditional classroom work. And it was also Halloween, and so it was just a really fun day altogether. So as for classroom management strategies that I saw during my observation, I would say I saw evidence of some things that we did learn in class, such as inner authority. My mentor teacher had definitely laid down the tracks in order for the class to run smoothly. All of the students listened and respected her. I didn't see any major behavioral problems during my time there. There may have been a few times that students got a little chatty or got a little, off task, but it wasn't anything, she couldn't handle in the classroom. So a positive impact Mrs. Brown has made with student learning, in my opinion, is personal connection and building relationships with her students. So she relates content to real life, and she always makes time for any student who is struggling, and whether that be academically, mentally, physically, she makes time for all of her students. If any student has a question, she makes she answers a question. She doesn't make it seem like that they're bothering her or anything like that. If they need to talk, about something going on in their home life, she is more than happy to, be a shoulder to cry on. And she also believes that students respond better and are willing to learn more, if their teacher knows that they care about them. She's also really big on building students' confidence by providing, positive feedback to them. Instead of just, pointing out what they need to work on, she points out, what they did right. So as for student behavior, like I said earlier, there wasn't a whole lot of misbehavior while I was there. A lot of the students were very well-mannered and just really sweet. I honestly think that their behavior may had to do with the fact of their maturity level, because they are all between the ages of 16 and 17. They are all quite mature and understand, their teachers' expectations for them. You could also tell that everyone had a mutual respect for one another. The student respected the teacher, students respected their peers, and, the teacher respected their students. So a lesson that I learned from the teacher, education program that was reinforced during my observation was probably positive classroom management has a lot of good and effective results versus, authoritative, classroom management. Teachers don't have to act like a dictator in their classroom in order to get their students to listen to them and engage with them. It is a way better approach to treat students with a mutual respect and build a good, student-teacher relationship with them if you want to reach your students. I do believe that. So for the first time, I learned that teachers get inspiration for their lesson from teacher books or other colleagues. Sometimes they pull something word for word out of a teacher book. In a short sense, teachers don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can teach what works. They may add their own twist to it to make it their own, but they don't have to come up with everyday, content on their own. I always used to think that teachers came up with every lesson from their own brain. And sometimes that is the case, but other times it's not. And I find that it is very comforting because lesson planning isn't the easiest thing to do as much, on your own as, to reach out to somebody to see, what they're doing in their classroom. It doesn't always have to be on you as the teacher. So I found this lesson to be very interesting. Being on the other side and being, putting your teacher hat on and being on the other side of the classroom, you see so much of what's going on. So for my assisting portion of field placement, where I assisted in activity, I led bell work on a few separate occasions, and it went really good. The students showed me respect and participated in the discussion about the answers to the bell work. It was like grammar questions that are from ACT prep. It was things like that. So my final reflection for this experience, overall, my field placement experience was absolutely fantastic. I felt really at home when I was in the classroom, and all the faculty and students definitely helped with that. They were all just really comforting and really sweet and just really nice to me the whole time. Throughout this experience, I have learned what my strengths and weaknesses are during instruction, of me, pursuing that teacher role. I know that there are a few things that I need to work on, such as, being more relaxed in front of a group of students. But I know that with time, I'll get better. Things will get better just, with practice. And I also learned that I love being in a high school classroom. So I think that is definitely the grades that I'm going to try to teach when I become a teacher. I didn't expect to have such a good time in my field placement and learn so much from my mentor teacher about how to keep a classroom running smoothly. I will take some of her beliefs and strategies and apply it to my own classroom whenever I start teaching, such as establishing, routines on the first day of school. That way students know what is expected of them each day, and building relationships with students in the classroom to just make a community where everyone just feels, loved, respected, and heard. That's just so important in a class, in my opinion. So, but yeah, that was my field placement experience, and I bid you a good day.